Swearing, guys, all right? Just don't push the button for you. Right, okay. All right, so we're calling tonight's meeting to order, the Monday, October 21st, 2024 meeting of the Commission on Sustainability, et cetera, et cetera. Our first item is public input on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone who would like to give public input on non-agenda items? Nope. Oh, you're right. Thanks. Okay. Let's start with roll call. Thank you, James. Why don't we just start up with Carlos, and we'll just go all the way around the room.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlos Collard. I work for the city's Resource Recovery and Recycling Division of the Public Works Department. I got to remember, I'm using this tonight. So thanks for all being the guinea pigs along with us.
Good evening. My name is James Conway. I'm with the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, and I'll be the secretary for this meeting this evening.
Good evening. My name is Clove Galilee, and I'll be with the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, supporting James and the Commission.
Good evening. I'm Karina Alvarado. I'm supporting Carlos Collard for the Resource Recycling and Recovery Division.
Hello, I'm Jean Laurie. I'm with Friends of Sunset Park.
Good evening, Yvonne Young. I'm the manager for Resource Recovery and Recycling, supporting my colleagues Carlos and Karina here. Thank you for having us tonight.
Great. And I'm Dean Kubani. I'm the chair of the Commission on Sustainability, Environmental Justice, and the Environment.
Good evening. I'm David Pettit, a board member.
I'm Ashley Olson, board member.
Yeah, you're commissioners.
Hi, I'm Rob Lempert. I'm a commission member.
Hi, I'm Judy Abdo. I am not a commission member.
Hi, I'm Alex Tower, commission member.
And
Chris Bishop, assistant director of Public Works.
Great. All right. It looks like we've got 5 commissioners here, so we have a quorum. So now I'm going to go on to public input on non-agendized items. And I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is public input on our special agenda items and consent calendar. Is there any public input on those items? Okay, so we're going on to our special agenda item, which is the Zero Waste Plan update with Carlos Collard. Take it away, Carlos.
All right. Thank you, Dean. And again, good evening, everyone. So let me give you a little background here, why we're here tonight. So I work with the Resource Recovery and Recycling Division. That's RRR. So what do? So we take care of your waste, your landfill waste, your recyclables in your blue bin, and also your organics in the green. But we also do outreach. Who received our print Zero Waste Guide recently? I know Judy did. You did as well. Jean, great. Good to see that. So we're here to help the community learn and embrace a zero waste lifestyle. And I want to just share a little image of our team here. So if you can see, we do a variety of things across the board, and our big task within the Sustainable City Plan, which, by the way, thank you for your service and also helping us celebrate the 30th year of the plan. I know some of you have been on the commission for many years, and Ashley, this is your second meeting, so welcome. So you're going to get a little brief zero waste education here tonight. But we do a variety of things. But when we talk about zero waste, when we talk about the Zero Waste Plan, that falls under our group. And that's a key part of what we do now and what we're going to do in the future. So when speaking of the future, that's what our presentation is tonight. We are in the middle of updating our plan, so we're here tonight to get feedback from all of you. And we'll go over that timeline later through our consultant, R3. So I want to introduce them right now, we have Garth Schultz. You'll see him there on the screen. He's the principal of R3 Consulting Group, no relation to our R3, Resource Recovery and Recycling. That's coincidence. And we also have Nate Forrest, who works with Garth. So these two gentlemen will be walking you through the update to the city's existing zero waste plan. So I'm going to give it to them. So take it away, Garth and Nate.
Excellent. And thank you all so much for having us this evening. Nate and I will be both addressing key points of our presentation this evening. Carlos, I have shared screen. Is that visible to the commission?
It is. Yes,
excellent.
it is.
Thank you so much. And then commissioners, so again, by way of introduction, I'm Garth Schultz, joined by my colleague Nate. We have been the leads on this update to the city's zero waste plan. And the goal of our presentation this evening is to seek feedback from the commission. One thing I should note, we can't see you, though you can see us, and our intention here is to allow you to have a bit of a dialogue with us as we move along. So hopefully through Carlos, as things come up either during the presentation or certainly at the end, if there's elements of discussion and as part of your feedback, we do welcome that, and we welcome being here to be able to present to you this evening. Okay, so, in terms of our presentation, just by way of a little bit more introduction, R3 Consulting Group, we work exclusively for municipal government agencies throughout the state of California on matters involving solid waste and recycling. So that includes things like rates, programs, compliance with state laws, and forward-looking opportunities like periodic zero waste plan creations and updates. We've actually been selected twice by the city of Santa Monica to be your trusted consultants working in this space, both in your prior zero waste plan update in 2019, and I was working closely with staff and the commission at the time in moving forward that update, and then your most recent rate study for the RRR division. We are a mission and driven organization that comes from a spirit of service and commitment to increasing environmental benefits for communities. In terms of this engagement, the reason we're here before you this evening is that we were contracted by the city to conduct an update to the zero waste plan here in 2024. And that encompasses both looking backwards in terms of evaluating past performance by the city, but more importantly, developing new strategies and forecasting and planning where the city should be going in order to advance its zero waste and sustainability goals. So just brief kind of snapshot of what you'll hear from us throughout our presentation and as we get to the end. Tonight, looking for your feedback. That's the main objective, to be, quote unquote, here in the room with you today. We'll be proceeding through the rest of the schedule you can see on the screen. I won't read it off for you, but in summary, we are recommending a kind of a 3-year pivot in focus for your zero waste objectives to set you up with another zero waste update coming up in 2028. Now, by way of background, Santa Monica is a leader, and you have been a leader in zero waste implementation and planning and policy for 30 years, dating all the way back to your initial sustainability city plan, which we understand you're celebrating your 30-year anniversary on this year. That plan highlighted some of the first objectives for zero waste, really anywhere in the state, but certainly the first forward-looking policy statement zero waste for the city at that time. Fast forward 20 years later, the city conducted its first zero waste strategic operations plan, which was a detailed plan aimed at putting into place more detail around zero waste focused approaches and goals. And then that has been perpetuated since in the Climate Adaptation and Action Plan, the more recent Zero Waste Plan update, and you can continue to see it reflected in the sustainability plan. You can see where we are here today, the darker circle, focusing on where Santa Monica can go and should go in terms of zero waste in the coming few years. And importantly, this is a little bit of a teaser, starting to position for and plan around the fact that the state will actually soon be unveiling its development now, its first statewide zero waste plan. So congratulations. Santa Monica's been a real leader. Now, before we really dig into some of the meat of what we want to talk about this evening, there's a key reminder to understand, which is zero waste is an aspirational goal. Zero waste doesn't mean true zero, although, the hope and intention is that someday it is. But it was really born from a desire to reduce waste and set ambitious goals, set a blueprint for better waste management. But even more than that, it was a blueprint for ways in which we can change culture, change economy, and change our perspective as it relates to waste, which Carlos and his team handle kind of at the end of its life cycle every day. And I'd like to share a couple of definitions that come out of your existing planning and policy documents. Going back 30 years, zero waste meant recycling or reuse of all natural and man-made materials back into nature or the marketplace rather than sending those materials to landfill or similar disposal options. 10 years ago, for the first zero waste strategic operations plan, it meant a change in perspective, requiring rethinking what you have traditionally regarded as trash and instead treating all materials as valued resources. It's about shifting consumption patterns, more carefully managing purchases, and maximizing the reuse of materials at the end of their intended use. And I want you to keep that in mind in some of these themes that you see on this slide as we proceed into our discussion today, because what we'll be sharing with you is that those broader changes in culture, changes in consumption pattern goals have been on the table for 10, 20, 30 years here in the city. There's been the initial approach that we've seen, and this is Santa Monica's not alone in this, has been focused on recycling efforts. And we believe, and the state also believes, it's time to start looking further upstream. So Santa Monica's made very good progress towards a zero waste future. And these are charts that we just pulled, and we could have created them ourselves, but you already had them on your Sustainable Santa Monica website, which is great. It's a reflection of what your zero waste trends and measurable outcomes have been over the course of history. On the left-hand side here, you can see, and hopefully my arrow is showing up so that you can actually see kind of what I'm pointing to the trends here, but an overall reduction in the tons of waste materials generated within the city over a 20-year period. So starting, 20 years ago, hundreds of thousands of tons of waste, inclusive of recycling and compostable waste, down to 60-ish thousand tons. So there's been measurable improvement. And on the right-hand side, you see that reflection reflected in this SB 1016's reference to state law, but what it means is how many pounds per person per day of waste that's sent to landfill. And again, you can see a similar trend here, steady progression towards sustained reduced amounts of waste going to landfill per person per day. I thought I heard a question come up. Was that just a sound in the back?
No question.
Great, thank you so much.
Sorry, well, actually, there is one question. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if, this is Dean, I'm the chair. I was just wondering if you could, I can't read the dates on the bottom. Maybe Carlos could even read those out from the screen.
2001 to 2021, those were the most recent figures that were on the city's website. And there are a couple of years of additional figures that the city has. I don't believe they haven't been updated yet to the city's Sustainable City website yet.
Great. And that, what's the lowest year there where we drop down?
Around 2011 up until, and also around 2021. I would like to kind of point out, you should take these figures with a little bit of a grain of salt. There's a few things that have changed over the course of time, including the way the state measures these figures. So, these are I think they look probably more precise than they actually are in reality, especially the one on the right, which is a measure of per capita disposal. The state kind of does track landfill disposal on a kind of a broader and aggregate basis, but it's known to be approximate and not all that precise. But yes, what it shows essentially is between 2011 and 2021, steady reductions compared to the prior 10 years. One thing I'd like to share here is that this trend, this downward trend, is a reflection of the city's good actions over the course of the last 20 to 30 years. The city's been doing the right things. You've been implementing the right recycling programs and composting programs. And our objective with this presentation isn't to rehash everything that you've done. It's really to kind of look backwards as an indicator of where you're going forwards. But what we want to be able to share here is that you've been doing the right things. You've been doing it at the right time. But you're still ultimately facing what we believe is going to be a plateau, and you can see it starting to show on this slide, and more recent data says the same thing. And there's some key reasons for that, and you're not alone in it. The state is seeing the same thing. I'd like to pass this over to Nate. He'll go into some of the root causes of the plateau, and that also points towards the key opportunities for improvement, not just here in Santa Monica, but on a statewide basis. Nate, over to you.
Thank you, Garth. As Garth mentioned, a lot has changed over time in terms of how zero waste plans were developed initially, thought and goal behind, the impetus really behind the design and development of zero waste plans. And our approach across the state has changed as well. This plateau that Garth has alluded to related to zero waste, it really has a lot to do with sort of diminishing returns over time. Initially, as Garth said, and he read you some quotes from some of those early zero waste plans, it was all about inspiration and culture shift, and really was focused more on attacking sort of the higher rungs of the zero waste pyramid that the EPA shares. It was focused on production and consumption, but as we sort of started to try to initiate these plans in real time, what we found was it was much easier to attack the problem more, let's say, downstream or post disposal. So after that sort of piece of garbage has hit your bin, we could do a lot more to make measurable production. So we drifted more towards our measurable improvement. So we drifted more towards diversion. It was measurable, it was satisfying to see the improvement, and it was really much more about what cities could control. Now those gains are flattening out, and in some cases, really statewide, they're getting worse. The recycling rate, it's down over the past decade. I think roughly, 10 years ago, it was in the 40s, and now, or roughly it was in the 50s, 10 years ago. Now we're in the 40s. So things are happening, and a lot of that really just boils down to the abundance of materials that we create. So we're recycling more, and actually we're getting better at how we recycle, but there's so much to handle that it's becoming hard to manage all of the materials. And it's really bringing us back to this mindset that with all this stuff to deal with, the more we create, it really comes down to consumption. And a lot of that stuff, just frankly, it's not recyclable. So, Garth, if you can advance to the next slide. What we're really talking about now sort of is a new direction. In addition to those plateau factors that I touched on in the past, in the last slide, what we're seeing is a result of a lot of change in international markets as well, and other impacts like COVID-19. But really, what comes down to it, the biggest issue has been sort of the peak that we got behind the curtain from international imports that were really going to China for most of the history of the sort of successful times of the diversion period. And what we saw in sort of the mid-2010s was China hit pause on a very, let's say, counterproductive import policy for our recycling rates, but maybe it was a better thing overall for the environment. A lot of those materials, it has been discovered, over time, were maybe not reaching the end markets that we thought they were. So it's both bad and good, but what it's really taught us is that we can't address the realities of consumption and production when we're just focused on what happens after we throw our garbage into a bin. It has to be more of a production and consumption mindset moving ahead. And really, Santa Monica, like other cities in California that are innovators, they sort of recognize this early. And again, this was built into the architecture of the original plans, but a plan, versus implementation are often very different. And a lot of it is very theory-based. And over time, we've realized that the theory was correct, but we're really actually going to have to address it from sort of a more proactive standpoint. So waste prevention, and really thinking about tackling the root causes of waste, shifting our focus to a more comprehensive sort of structural approach, a systems approach that helps design waste out of the cycle itself, rather than just focusing primarily on it post-disposal. The easy way to say this is you're not going to recycle our way to zero waste. It's not going to happen. There's just too much flooding the system for that to be a reality. The old make, take, dispose mindset is what we call it, and that comes from some Ellen MacArthur theorizing around the circular economy, but it is. I mean, that's an old industrial revolution mindset. You extract, you create, you make a product, and when you're done with it, that's it. Yeah, the new process really has to be a focus towards reuse, repair, really designing for second, third, fourth life onward. I think this little graphic does a great job of simplifying a pretty complex system and sort of theory towards addressing it. You'll notice in the second, you see a couple loops in a recycling economy, because you do, maybe that bottle does get recycled once before it ends up in the landfill, or plastics goes through a process, it's reconstituted, and you get a new water bottle. But at the end of the day, you're maybe getting a couple, 2, 3 more loops out of that process. What we really need to do is focus on a system that is addressing this before we're creating materials that we really don't have a great solution for downstream. Garth, if you'd like to head to the next slide.
Excuse me, gentlemen, we have 2 questions from the commissioner, so I'll go with Ashley first, and then was it Robert after David? Okay, I'll go ahead, Commissioner.
My question is, there was a big focus for a long time on the 3 R's of just the recycling component, and now I see that there's been a shift in focus to now about the reuse. But is there going to be an emphasis on the reduction component of what we're actually using instead of just reuse, repair, repurpose, but actually the reduction of what we're?
And that's more important than prevention is first, right? Reuse and repurpose is great, but if we are able to start to send signals up the supply chain to make more effective material decisions at the extraction level, at the production level, that's where the big opportunity lies. It is harder to grasp from one separate silo, such as we are only waste experts or we are only focused on one part of the system. But integrating our work as sustainability professionals, it really is prevention and reduction that makes the most impact. So that's absolutely a great question. And that's key to the understanding of the circular economy, of course.
Commissioner Pettit?
Hi, this is kind of a nerdy question. Are you guys aware there's some proposals out there to take the organic portions of municipal solid waste, gasify them, and turn that into hydrogen? Have you guys run across that?
I could not catch the last part of your question. I apologize, Commissioner.
So the proposals, I've seen a couple of these, are to take the organic portions of municipal solid waste, gasify them, that is, pyrolyze them, and then turn the result into hydrogen. My question is, have you guys seen that? And I guess if you have, do you think that idea has legs?
Yeah, there are a number of approaches for transformation that the state, too, is looking at. Pyrolysis is one of them, of course. I think long-term, it's sort of going to be an all oars in the water approach. We don't contemplate that in this transitional period of our approach to Santa Monica's zero waste plan. There are in addition to pyrolysis towards, production outputs that you're talking about, there are a number of other, sort of experimental and new wave developments that look at transformation, hydrogen, and other components. And we're focused here more sort of on, diagnosing the root causes and starting to look at, like, how do we shift the mindset through zero waste planning and Santa Monica towards different approaches with our strategy. So we wouldn't be tackling that specifically here, but we are aware of a number of different technologies out there that will look at organics and other materials to that end effect.
If I can jump in for a second, once again, Yvonne, RRR manager. So, Commissioner, to your question, it's also a matter of what kind of infrastructure is within a reasonable distance from Santa Monica. So, in Southern California, the options for recycling organics is actually quite limited. There are only a number of facilities that have the capability to take organics and transform them. Most of the facilities that are within distance, a reasonable distance, is still using windrow composting, just good old-fashioned turning the apple core and the banana peels that you put in your green bin into compost and mulch in 120 days. There are a number of very small handful of facilities have the capabilities, including LA County Sanitation in Puente Hills, which is, 40, 50, 60 miles from here, that has the capability to turn our organics into renewable energy. But they also only sell the renewable energy through the county. So infrastructure, the accessibility to existing infrastructure is definitely a big piece of this.
Thanks, Yvonne. Garth, I think, you moved ahead. So where does that put us now? I would like to, again, reflect on the fact that 30 years ago, Santa Monica saw that production and consumption were at the root cause of this, and something had to change in order to achieve the zero waste goals the city was contemplating at the time. Other early adopter agencies are looking at the same conditions. They're plateauing, end of pipe as we call it, achievement measures they're struggling to keep up with the goals that they've set. And again, a lot of it comes to that direct influence that they don't have on production and consumption. What's really interesting is now the state of California has entered the picture. And having never had a statewide zero waste plan before, this is now something that the state is pursuing. And they have listed out at the very core of the mission of the statewide zero waste plan, and I'll read this. Achieving zero waste means a comprehensive circular strategy addressing all materials, providing convenient collection, and optimizing infrastructure to maximize valuable resources through source reduction, reuse, recycling, and maximizing the environmental, social, and economic benefits of a circular economy. You can tell how much that statement is leaning upstream and towards that first upper bar of the waste management hierarchy, the source reduction and reuse that you all have pointed out is essential to this process. This is a huge signal to all of the jurisdictions in California that are struggling with zero waste plans now, as we have identified. And it also comes at a great time because this effectively has to happen in order for the cities that have shown this improvement to continue on their journey towards zero waste and towards, creating a more livable community for all their residents. So as we shift sort of towards this circular roadmap or a policy framework, it is going to incorporate the elements of source reduction and reuse at the top and really start to look at how we reframe our strategies around that. And what's really interesting here too is, given the time, the timeline and the alignment right now with the state focus, this is effectively going to unlock opportunities to sort of increase the ROI on the actions that Santa Monica takes right now, because there's going to be partnership opportunities around funding via grants for EPR programs. We have SB 54 coming into effect, which is effectively going to ensure that the producers of these materials that we are struggling to recycle and manage downstream are going to be held accountable for their production. And what that means is it's going to incentivize sort of different types of materials to be, produced in a manner that it makes it more economically advantageous for the producers as well. So there will be grants forthcoming related to this approach. And again, this is a great time and shows great alignment with where Santa Monica is moving in terms of the circular economy. Next slide, Garth. This is a sort of effective, but maybe if not oversimplified way of showing, that we cannot continue to sort of pursue this linear approach, this sort of, industrial revolution mindset approach to creating and consuming materials. And what we have to do is ensure that producers and consumers, not just recyclers and downstream materials management professionals, are all part of the equation here and start to move towards a system that prioritizes the things that I've been talking about tonight. That transition to from a make, take, and dispose mindset to really something that's efficient and a more functional system. Often this is used as a comparison to nature. There's not a lot of waste in nature. You don't see a lot of materials that have no other use. So it's that mindset towards circularity that new strategies and approaches are being taken. In a nutshell, it's not a one-way street. The state, now Santa Monica and the state together are looking at ways to improve outcomes, again, not only after waste hits your bin, but at the producer and consumer level as well. Next slide, Garth. And here's a highly more detailed and complicated approach to what I'm talking about. I just always like to make a point not to oversimplify this, because then folks say, well, we have been recycling and it's just chasing arrows that you're showing us again. But the point here is that if you look to the left, this evolution to a different system, you have recycling in a linear economy. There aren't many loops associated with it. As I mentioned before, you get 1, 2, maybe 3. You'll hear a lot of talk from a number of sort of, leaders in the corporate recycling community that say, well, you can recycle plastic bottles, to infinity, but hasn't in the past really been a market imperative towards that. So you had these sort of short loops. Aluminum and other materials are different, and you had more loops, but it wasn't enough. So if you look to the right, this evolution, it's not just about diversion and recycling. It's really about producing less, as was mentioned earlier, and doing more with what you actually do produce. So look at the tighter loops. The reuse and share loop is going to happen much more, and with much more alacrity. These things are taking place. You go out a little bit more, and you're in the repair and remanufacture, but you're still, in both of those cases, you're not deconstructing and reconstructing materials, which is very, it's highly entropic. It uses a lot of energy to do that. So it's really about tightening these loops strategically. And that leads to less material extraction at the top. And the more we can use the materials effectively that we create, the better off the economy will serve all of its inhabitants, and we can, ultimately, design for a much more, effective and sustainable lifestyle with the goods that we use. Garth, I'll hand it back over to you for the next slide.
And I will say for the commission, much of what we've had to share at this point is pointing towards the need and the rationale for a pivot and focus. And it's funny because Nate has a master's in this area, and I've taught classes on solid waste, and we're trying to distill that down to you in a short talk this evening in order to get feedback. But there's just reams and reams of study and research and analysis, not just our own, but from many folks that kind of are contributing to this. And so we are giving you kind of the Cliff Notes version of this. And, we appreciate you kind of understanding that. But this is the kind of thing where if we were at a cocktail party, you probably want to corner us for hours to talk about some of these things, I would imagine. But, what we want to kind of point you towards now is given everything that you've heard, what do we recommend? What do we recommend as Santa Monica's next steps? And in short summary, and we'll go into detail on the subsequent slides, it's around taking this next few years to start to focus your sites upstream. And then in 2027 reevaluate your position with some new information and some new data in your hands and begin new strategies on a longer term basis in alignment with where the state may end up going. Still too soon to say their exact strategic approach because their plan isn't unveiled yet, starting in 2028. For the near term, our objective for the city is work within your existing funding. There are $2.5 million in funds available within the city's rate structure for the next several years. So part of our aim, our objective is not to go back to the ratepayers to seek additional funds in the short term in order to do this work. It's rather relying on the resources that you have. But coming up in 2028 is when the city would be going back out for its next approval for new rates and authorization of those next rates. And our objective is to align those new resources with new objectives for zero waste implementation for 2028 and beyond. So we're looking at a short-term pivot point, essentially. Now, taking that into more detail, we've got kind of three high-level kind of titles or topic areas for these initiatives with around 3 initiatives each. And I'll describe them in a little bit of detail, and I'll ask for Nate's help on a couple of them. But in the near term, we recommend continue your progress on the recycling initiatives that you have in place. And there's a few areas where you can apply that. One is continuing the outreach and education that you heard Carlos mention earlier. The city does a good job with its outreach and education, but there's still more that can be done, both with more resources, more people, more boots on the ground, more conversations, more work with those that are struggling to sort their materials in the right way, but also more focus on the right ways in which to get folks to change those behaviors. And again, the city does a good job here now, but with additional resources and training and focus, there's more return on that investment that can be achieved. And that's really at the kind of consumer choice end of this equation, which is an important one to start to leverage more. Even in educating consumers more around their recycling choices, you create an open door to start to talk about their consumption choices and their support and influence on production choices. So that's point one. Point two, we know there's an opportunity in Santa Monica and frankly throughout the state to improve reuse and recovery of building materials. There's a lot of construction in virtually all sectors, maybe a little bit paused in certain sectors with the economy the way it is, but those materials tend not to be recycled or recovered in very high rates. There's a lot of kind of quote unquote leakage materials that could be recovered that are not recovered, and frankly very valuable materials to recover. So our secondary recommendation in this category is for the city to improve reuse and recovery of those through updated ordinances and policies, but also innovative approaches that would begin incentives for deconstruction rather than just demolition of certain types of buildings and in certain situations. By no means, a catch-all mandate, but to start to create opportunities for those buildings with very high degrees of reusable lumber and other materials to benefit from a deconstruction approach rather than just demolition, which frankly always yields in a lower overall recovery rate than a deconstruction approach does. And then finally, on the third bullet here, the city has an opportunity to use end-of-pipe solutions to recover those materials that consumers themselves don't recover very well or don't sort properly. Another way of putting this is, for certain sectors of the community, those that are in public spaces or commercial kind of areas where training and sustaining solutions for better sorting are just not that feasible, or there's a low return on investment for them, do that work for them. And this image on the right gives you a sense of what it is. It's effectively a materials recovery facility, something that rather than sorting or recycling into various commodities for marketing on the commodities market, you sort garbage and you get the recyclables and the organics out of it. The city has a contract in place now with an entity that can do that, and our encouragement is start to do more of that for those types of materials where there's the most benefit, and that's some of those in public spaces and with others that don't have a good track record of sorting themselves. By no means are we suggesting this citywide, because it's very costly to do this. So point A, continue your progress on recycling initiatives. Point B, start taking those early steps towards a circular economy. Again, engage the consumers in early pilots and programs and partnerships. There are a host of organizations that are supporting reused cups initiatives, other sorts of reusables that can be brought back to restaurants or mailed back in. There's a host of those that we can and will suggest to city staff for implementation, but it doesn't mean that those are the only ones that are out there. I think the point here is start engaging consumers in Santa Monica in those programs, both to start to test messages, show support for these programs with other partners, and then also learn good lessons and collect good data for your next steps in the process. Develop and implement circular economy standards for city purchases. Nate, I'm going to let you take this one because you've done more research on this topic.
Sure. So in terms of circular economy standards, I don't know how many of you all might be familiar with environmentally preferable purchasing standards. It's really a way that the EPA came up with to ensure recyclability and optimize environmental outcomes of sort of the materials that procurement departments would buy for cities, for state government, any large organization. Think of circular economy standards as that sort of on steroids. What you do with circular economy standards are prioritize products, like I've been talking about, that are designed for long-term use. First off, products that use less extractive means to come into existence, and then prioritize those products also that can be repaired, that can be reused, the kind of things that are going to stay in those smaller, tighter loops that I showed on slides previously, rather than just something that comes through once or twice and is recycled and that's it, and or something that goes directly to the landfill. So effectively, when you create these standards, and these would be voluntary to begin with, you're seeking to minimize the throughput of the linear waste that goes through the make, take, and dispose, and just tighten those loops, right? So
and then lead by example, at the city. So this is really a lead by example initiative for the city to develop those standards and begin to implement them, again, for learning and experience, but also to demonstrate to the community that you're putting your money where your mouth is, effectively. Right. And then the last bullet here is to start partnering with state and producer responsibility organizations that are leading the implementation of SB 54. And what I have in this graphic is really kind of what SB 54 means. The state has established these metrics and goals for reducing single-use plastics, getting them more recyclable, and then also ensuring that more of them can be recyclable in the future. It's a complex law. The rules just came out, I think, last week. We're still digesting what they look like. There's a very short comment period on this. But the opportunity here is that there are statewide extended producer responsibility organizations like the Circular Action Alliance Network, the National Stewardship Action Council, all that are seeking partner agencies to start this implementation of these new standards. And this becomes an opportunity for the city to work in stepwise fashion with the state, implementing these cutting-edge programs, and also, I think, exhibiting your leadership while also potentially making yourself a valid partner for funding and additional support and initiatives. Final category for us as you move into the future is to start to gather data to inform new strategies and metrics. And this is an important one. And, we presented these in order, but really they're all going to be happening early on in this. This is not a linear ordering of how you'll go about approaching your strategies. But the main thing that we're recommending to the city is to start to sort and analyze your waste streams to understand types, sources, and recovery rates for common materials that are in waste streams. This is not just citywide. You can isolate this down to, say, tourist areas. You can look at pier waste. You can look at commercial waste, multifamily waste. This is not to say a waste characterization in the sense that perhaps you've heard of before from us or the state and others, which is, well, what's in our waste stream? This is about what's in our waste stream and how much of it are we recovering effectively today in areas that are recoverable. Therefore, informing both in real time, real time meaning on a year-to-year basis, not necessarily day-to-day, informing in real time how your initiatives that you're employing are having an effect on waste recovery outcomes, but also gathering information for new strategies that you might consider leading up to a 2028 zero waste update. And I wanted to look at my notes on this real quick, and there's kind of two ways of being able to do this in the recommended actions. One, remember, we're recommending you send some of your garbage to material recovery facilities. They're going to have access to really good data about what's on those. And then via this strategy, also employing folks who will go in and do those deep dives into your specific waste streams to come up with not just what's in our waste stream, but how are we doing in recovering the recoverable components of our waste stream. Therefore, informing your next steps with respect to the zero waste plan update in 2028 and your alignment and your partnership and ROI opportunities with the state's plan. Okay, a breath. You've heard us talk a lot. We can't see whether we're putting you to sleep or not, so hopefully you're still awake. Effectively, this is our timeline. You saw this at the beginning. We are seeking your feedback tonight. We will be proceeding to turn our outline here, pending your feedback, into a public-facing plan, not unlike your climate action and adaptation plan that the city has. And our anticipation is to come back to the commission in December for a recommendation of letter of endorsement. I do understand we're waiting to understand whether you're likely to have a quorum in December, so that potentially is subject to change. We're targeting council adoption of the plan in February, and then, frankly, recommending kicking right off in early 2025 to implement these strategies through 2027. Then in mid-2027, still midstream on implementing strategies, start to gather that information, both what you've been learning in terms of your own implementation of pilots and gathering of data, your alignment with the state in these extended producer responsibility organizations to inform both what strategies you're going to employ starting in 2028, going through the next 10 to 20 years potentially, but also what are the resources that would be needed in order to do that, resources that the state may be able to afford and other resources that RRR would seek out of its rate revenues. And both of those would then align for likely a recommendation and adoption in 2028. And then, Nita, I'd like to give it back to you for the final kind of take it back home message in terms of the overall, and then we'll bring it back to Carlos and get feedback from the commission.
Great, thanks, Garth. Yeah, we just want to leave you sort of with the finer points of what we're trying to sort of impart from our talk tonight, and that is, recycling and waste diversion is obviously still very important. It's just not the most important piece, and we really, frankly, should not be focusing all this time and effort on it for reasons we've shared tonight. Santa Monica started out acutely aware that production and consumption are critical aspects of zero waste. It's in those early documents, planning documents. Over time, we sort of drifted to what's more tangible. It was satisfying to show that improvement, but we've started to hit a wall. And this is the same that's happening with other zero waste plans across the state. And we also know this doesn't tackle the core of the issue. There's more volume of materials, we're increasing consumption, and that's leading to unsustainable growth. So we have to pivot towards attacking these problems where we can have more impact. This is the only way to really move the needle towards zero waste. We believe that wholeheartedly, and our updated plan will reflect, a return to that original vision and in alignment with what we think, what we know to be the state's first zero waste plan, signaling a very similar direction throughout California. So thank you for your time tonight. We really appreciated presenting.
Carlos, we'll look to you. Commission feedback.
Yes.
I'll leave the slide deck up unless folks like it to bring it down.
All right, thank you, Garth and Nate. So let's open the floor for questions.
Great. Well, actually, why don't we stick with commissioners first, and then we'll open it to the public. So, commissioners, why don't we start with Rob, and then David?
Great presentation. Thank you. I want to get a sense of what is the network of other cities that are in roughly the situation Santa Monica is in, doing this pivot and moving towards promoting circular economy, both within the city and then more broadly. So is there a network of cities to learn from, collaborate with, and what is that network?
Yeah, I'll take this. There are not all that many cities that have robust zero waste plans, and there are even fewer that have been as diligent about updating and reviewing their status and progress as Santa Monica has been. So this would put you in a network of cities that include Berkeley, who's actually now, even though folks look to Berkeley as being a leader in all of this, they still haven't yet adopted their first zero waste plan, but it's leading in these same directions. City of Palo Alto has a very similar approach. City of San Francisco is moving in that same direction. I'm a little less familiar with what exactly is going on the ground, and say for the city of LA or say San Diego, but they're facing the same set of conditions, which is this limiting return on outcome from focusing on recycling only. They're all seeing that same kind of move towards a plateau that we've evidenced here on this presentation. It's also the reason state has seen this coming for a few years now, so it's the reason the state is focused on its zero waste plan and the circular economy. So you join a select few that are positioned to be in a place of leadership on focusing upstream and on circular economy.
And to piggyback on Garth's point, staff has also conducted a local survey of the neighboring cities in Southern California. And I don't know if Carlos or Karina, you want to speak to our survey results a little bit. Bottom line is a lot of the cities do not even have a zero waste plan to begin with. And here we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of our city having one. But Karina, Carlos?
Yeah, I can. So, yes, we are one of the few cities with an actual zero waste plan. And we're taking this opportunity here at year 10 of this plan, adopted in 2014, to look at what the state's doing. As you saw that, the state is creating its first zero waste plan. And so there's this big shift. We're just trying to get, I guess, on the shift, or I wouldn't say we're ahead of it, but I guess to your, your question, we would be ahead of, we are ahead of many right now, but we'd be even more ahead of that that we're able to shift to this focus and education on, the circular economy and helping people understand what that means, and then going back to, yes, reduction is a key part of that. But bottom line is we need all those things: reduce, repair, reuse. And there's also refuse, not refuse, but refuse. So there's another one there. But that gives you a sense of where we stand with those within the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Hi. Are you guys going to address the costs or potential costs to consumers and property owners and the like of the more sophisticated approaches that you're going to study?
I heard, are we going to address the cost? I heard something about property owners, but I couldn't quite catch that part of the question. Carlos, maybe you can just restate it because I can hear you a little bit better.
Yeah, so essentially it's what are the projected, if we have those projected costs on the Santa Monica community, correct? I mean, in essence, the Santa Monica community to implement, some of these initiatives that you've outlined.
So with respect to the city's costs to implement these over the 3-year period, there is no change in cost compared to the existing rates that are charged by RRR and were adopted by council last year on a 5-year rate study plan. That plan included incremental funding for zero waste initiatives, which will be leveraged in these 3 years without changing rates to ratepayers. We will also be analyzing for those types of programs, say the construction and demolition ordinance update and deconstruction policy. Those are being put forward as incentive-based models, which therefore doesn't spread a requirement across, say, the construction community. Those would be voluntary measures to begin progress towards deconstruction, but without a broader impact across that community. So this is working with existing resources and funding to the division.
And I'll add a visual example. At the top of the meeting, I said, did anyone receive our zero waste guide in the mail, right? That type of outreach, that's already built into our budget. Actually, there's a state grant that we received that funds some of that effort as well. When you saw the image of the materials recovery facility, we have a contract for that now. We're getting that underway. So for the next, for the life of this rate study that the council just approved last year, right? Those costs are already built in. Good question.
Great. I have a few, but do other commissioners have any?
Commissioner Olson.
Go ahead.
So in your analysis, are you guys factoring in, we've talked a lot about production. Are you guys factoring in the production of certain materials on a national scale, or are you going more specific about how the production of certain materials like plastics are going to be affecting our community and then factoring that into the plan and the assessment? Is that how you're doing it? Or are you getting as detailed as like projecting develop construction projects on our city and how many permits are being submitted for large scale production or large scale construction projects, and then factoring that into how that affects our zero waste?
I'll take this one. So to answer your question, we are looking, you have to start small, right, with sort of a shift of this nature. We are looking at deconstruction, permitting process. A lot of this has to begin not in mandatory terms, but in very volitional aspects of how we might attack this. The circular procurement strategy, I think, is really the way you begin to walk that road. I've had the good fortune to work with some large organizations who have successfully implemented similar initiatives to reduce sort of the embodied carbon in their supply chain, for lack of a better way to put it. And you can net out very nice results. The city, by taking these steps and showing leadership and saying, even if it is initially just standards that we want to adhere to, they're not mandatory, we're going to make choices and we're going to prioritize via contracts and procurement language, upstream opportunities, supply chain opportunities that position for better outcomes downstream. And I think that's how you do it, and that's how you begin. And then hopefully you start to seed a culture around this, and then other folks take that sort of signal from the city as well, and organizations start to see it, citizens start to see it, and you kind of build forth from there.
Right. Alex?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions too. Excuse me. I'm thinking about the deconstruction part of it and how expensive it is to actually harvest materials during deconstruction. And so I guess I'm curious, I know you said it would be incentivized in some way. Are those kinds of details something that will be included in your recommendation or in your report? And kind of as a sister to that question, there's a lot of waste out there that's mixed material, and we could actually make use of those materials better if they were single material waste products. So I'm wondering if those kinds of recommendations could be part of this overall report.
I'll take that one, Nate. So in terms of the latter part of the question, the mixed materials, that if they were not mixed, it could actually be subject to more recovery. That's exactly the reason to align with the state's work on producer responsibility, right? There's very little ability for the city to have alone an impact on that production flow and that economy, but working in partnership with the state and other organizations and other cities who will surely be a part of the effort with the state, that's where you can kind of target those upstream materials. With respect to deconstruction, I think yes, there will be very kind of concrete recommendations in the plan about how to do this, but one of them is just simply to state, look, for certain types of buildings, the city encourages deconstruction and an evaluation of deconstruction. we're going to have the recommendations that we've already are in place of drafting right now also include building a deconstruction contractor's profile so that it's easier to get access to that information, and then also for those types of buildings that may benefit from deconstruction, providing an avenue for them to get an early permit for deconstruction rather than having demolition and construction tied together in terms of a permit requirement, which is typically the way that occurs. A project being able to come in early for a deconstruction permit without waiting on their construction permit to be able to do some of their early tear down work, and seeing if that creates an economically viable signal for them. So again, not mandating it, but providing an avenue for incentivization. And Zero Waste Sonoma, which is 10 member agencies in Sonoma County, are unveiling that exact sort of approach right now. Again, with a recognition of, it is costly and it can be difficult and can be challenging, but pairing that with the available resources, at least starting to build more support for that kind of activity within the community.
And I guess what I'm wondering is whether that level of granularity and that kind of recommendation is going to be a part of this, or I'm just curious, where this whole thing fits in.
Yeah, good question. And we've actually been kind of dialoguing with staff around that too. So, our contract, our target is to create a public-facing report, something that can be understandable to the public and also kind of like the playbook as a policy manual for our staff as they work year to year over these initiatives. So, it's not intended to go and do extreme, step-by-step detail in a public-facing report. We will be working with staff also to kind of create the back end, here's the how-to of all of this stuff, but the public-facing report will include the concrete recommendations around incentivizations for deconstruction, the recommendation for establishing a deconstruction contractor listing, and then also, dedicating staff time to the work of advancing deconstruction policy through ordinance updates and management of those, and review of the deconstruction projects over the course of the next few years.
Thank you.
Now I'm on. This is Dean Kubani. I'm the chair of the commission. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate all the work you guys have been doing. I had a few questions and then a recommendation. One thing that I didn't see here tonight was, we've had a zero waste plan for 10 years here in Santa Monica, and I didn't really see an evaluation of, I know we had goals for our zero waste plan for the future back when we adopted it in 2014 and 2019, and I haven't seen how we've done compared to the goals that we set. Which would, I think, number one, would be great to include in the new plan that you present to council. Basically say, here's what we've done, here's what we haven't done, and hopefully you're taking a critical look at what we agreed we were going to do and evaluating maybe what we haven't been able to do because of cost, because of staff issues, because of whatever. So I guess that is a recommendation. And what made me think of that was when you were talking about gathering this data on various waste streams and what percentage is being recycled, and that's something that I would think we would have already been doing as part of a zero waste effort that's in place. I mean, we want to be evaluating what our effectiveness is at trying to reach these goals that we've set. And I recognize that we, don't have everything in place, but that gets to my recommendation. In order for this not just to be another exercise in putting together a plan that can't be implemented or won't be implemented, it would make sense to have a critical evaluation of how we've done, and also with staff providing some clear input on why we haven't been able to do this or that because of funding or staffing issues or whatever. And let's lay out some realistic goals, and hopefully this plan that you bring back to council is going to have timelines, budgets, or suggested budgets, or at least ideas around funding to get this stuff done, and then also identifying the responsible people in the organization who are going to do it. You probably don't know, I worked for the city for a number of years and have been responsible for creating plans like this and implementing them, and so I kind of know how it works and also how it doesn't work. So I would really suggest, let's make it, I don't want a pretty plan, I want a plan that has very specific goals and targets and who's going to do what and when are we going to do it and how are we going to get it done. So what you've presented sounds great. I do know we were talking about looking upstream years ago and doing waste reduction efforts and a variety of things. I don't know how those things turned out, but it'd be nice to know, why we didn't do them if we didn't do them, and what are we going to do differently in order to make it work this time. So I guess that's not a question, but a bunch of recommendations. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, thank you for the work you've done. It sounds great, and I'm looking forward to seeing the draft report.
Thanks, Dean. And briefly in response, I believe you were probably on the commission at the time, but when we did the 2019 update, your name sounds familiar. I can't see you. So what I was going to say, we have done all that look in terms of the evaluation of what city staff has done in reference to the 2019 objectives, and then also with respect to the goals that the city had set out. One of the things that's interesting, and we've been struggling with how to convey this in a way that makes sense, is that, the relationship between what the city has done to implement prior strategies and its achievement of the goal are decoupled, right? The achievement of the goal measurement metric is a per capita disposal goal, and it was set by, I believe, kind of council policy prior to even the 2014 plan being established, and it was set at 1.1 pounds per person per day. Through our evaluation, we've identified the city cannot get there through its just handling of materials. You could send every shred of waste that is generated in the city to a very high achieving processing facility where people could sort perfectly at the curb, and you still wouldn't get there. There's just enough remaining material that you would not get there. So I think one of the things we're sensitive to is showing that and having folks feel like, well, this means that we failed. And it's like, no, that's the story we've been trying to tell. It's not a failure. It's having to do with the fact that addressing the upstream consumption and production elements of the equation up until effectively now has been largely out of the city's ability to influence in an effective way because you're one city and a state and an economy. So it's the kind of thing that we can address in the plan, and we certainly have already addressed this in detail with staff. We welcome the opportunity for the city to set realistic goals about where it could be going forward, but we also think that's not measured in tons, right? It's not necessarily measured in how much tons of waste is going to landfill or how many of those tons that we've recycled. There's a new measurement metric that we feel is necessary, and we're candidly a little reluctant to put one on the table at this point while we know the city and the state are going to be undergoing a pivot period. We believe that new measurement metrics will be understood as the state starts going through its process of its zero waste plan development. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit more of a sense. It's the kind of thing we certainly can show, but again, there's a decoupling between city staff's work on discrete initiatives and the outcomes with respect to goal measurement. And the reason is the elephant in the room. It's the fact that there's been very little ability to influence the upstream actors.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And just for my 2 cents, I think it's worthwhile to have that present that discussion somehow in the report. and, let people understand what, we set a super aggressive goal that was decoupled, and here's why it didn't work, and here's what we're doing in order to, fix that, which I think is a great way to do it. It shows that we're looking critically at this, and that it's not, and it sounds like it's not just going to be an exercise in planning, but it's actually, we're trying to figure out how to really reach the goal, which is what we all want. So I appreciate all that work.
And even what is the goal? Like, when it's an aspirational goal, what are we really measuring it in terms of? So we appreciate your feedback there, and it's helpful for us, and I think for staff to hear, because these are the very issues that we've been grappling with in this project, is this inflection point towards the upstream.
And Chair, if I can add one point. So the plan is to outline the specific stakeholders in the city that will be in charge of these recommendations. So there will be heavy hand-in-hand collaboration between my division, Resource Recovery and Recycling, and OSC, the Office of Sustainability and the Environment. C&D, or deconstruction, we definitely need to work very collaboratively with community development, right? With the planning folks, the folks at building and safety. But RRR will be the lead agency, if you will, to lead the city towards zero waste. And also, I wanted to comment on your comment earlier about it would be cool if this plan gives us a little bit more of an idea of what have we done in the past years in terms of the strategies that were laid out in the last 10 years. So I want to definitively address that. Staff has been working really hard and following those zero waste strategies laid out in previous plans, and we have been making material improvements. In terms of the PPD, the pounds per person per day of landfill per capita disposal, 10 years ago, during our first zero waste plan, we were at about 5.4 pounds per person. So meaning that each Santa Monican was producing over 5 pounds of landfill trash. That's just sent straight to the landfill. And in 2019, so 5 years ago, that number didn't really move the needle. In the last 5 years, due to the good work of Garth's team, laying out a very simple, easy to follow strategy in the 2019 plan, just a 5-step plan, we were able to drop that PPD, the pounds per person per day, from 5 to 3.3 at one point. So despite the difficulties of COVID and the lack of resources and staffing, we were able to make material changes. But I think what the R3 team, our consultant, is saying is we're at a point in history where we're hitting a plateau, and we must kind of pause and reassess what it truly means to be zero waste, and also to align our goal with the state's goal as well.
And then we'll take your question, Commissioner Olson. I'd like to just jump in and say this. The 2019 plan had 5 priority areas. So and this will be a good refresh, and there's new folks here, so I'll just outline these 5. Number 1 was to build a zero waste team. Prior to that, we might have had one person maybe dabbling in it. Now we have a team of 3. That's about halfway to where the plan recommended 5 years ago. Second was to create a city ordinance that aligns with, you'll hear this term, you'll see this in the plan, SB 1383. That is the state's mandatory organics recycling law. So your food scraps, what you just had out there, where does that go? It doesn't go in your black bin, it goes in your green, along with your yard waste, right? We've done that, the city's done that. Third thing was to we think, the food recovery program, implement that. Guess what? Through our contractor, Food Cycle LA, last year we recovered over 1 million pounds of edible food, and that was distributed to organizations, individuals, and so on. Number 4 was technical assistance and engagement, right? I touched on a little bit of outreach earlier, but what that is getting to the hard-to-reach places, what we call our businesses, we call commercial accounts, but businesses, the apartments, condos, people that are harder to reach just because you can't just easily go up to their doorstep, right? Maybe there's security gates and so on. We've started doing that, but we can do more of that, and that's what our aim is for the next few years, right? That's started, but yes, we haven't met that goal, right? So, and then lastly is a zero-waste communications plan. Started those elements, but we can do more. We haven't, that just kind of got kicked off. So that gives you kind of a summary. 5 priority areas, yes, we've achieved on some. We've met some part way, and we know that we have to go do more to fulfill those. But those from 5 years ago dovetail into what you just heard tonight. Commissioner Olson, you had a question.
Given that Santa Monica is a leader in the zero waste, and we're one, municipality that has been actually focused on that when pretty much no one else really has, for the most part. How do you see us aligning with the state that's just now kind of getting it together when on the zero waste plan when we've been in 10 years already? How do you see that aligning, and do you see there being anything that kind of sets us back a little bit or puts us on hold as we try to sync with the state's plan?
Yeah, good question. Thank you for that. We don't see it setting you back and putting you on hold. The state's catching up quickly, and I think the key take home should be that the state, unlike individual cities or even a loose network of cities across the state, is in a unique position to more directly address the economy, production and consumption, producers and consumers. So, and they've been very clear that that's a key focus of their planning effort that they're undertaking now. So we believe that aligning with the state on that is both, following what they're doing, reaching out to the main actors in that space, commenting on drafts of these materials as they come out, but also engaging in pilot efforts on the ground that point to the kinds of things that the state is likely to be recommending, right? Take-back programs. There's, a few cities who've been moving forward with funding on, innovative, specific material type reuse efforts, right? Take back the cup type programs. So I think what our vision for you in this is, be in step with the state. You don't really need to wait for them. On the circular economy, you can go right in lockstep with them and continue forward momentum. And then while doing that and while being in step with them, start to implement those localized on-the-ground pilot efforts that are a good fit, those that would be a good fit for Santa Monica, and learn and grow from those during that process. I think both of those are the kind of core tenets of our recommendation about how you engage with them.
And I'm just going to add to that. So the new SAR, if you will, of RRR at the state level, that agency is called CalRecycle. The new executive director came from a circular economy background. So RRR at the Santa Monica level, we are taking hints from that. Also, CalRecycle already had a public comment session on their 2026 inaugural zero waste plan. Staff and I attended that meeting as well. So we were just there to observe and to hear the public's comments, and circular economy was the talk of the town. So we're definitely not shooting in the dark and doing something completely, separate from what the state is doing. Rather, we're taking hints from the direction that the state is going to make sure that we are in lockstep and in alignment with the state's direction.
Is the state engaging with Santa Monica or with cities who have implemented these plans?
Not at a state to local municipality level. They make themselves available. So each municipality has a liaison, has a rep at the Sacramento level. So Karina definitely works closely with our Cal Recycle reps. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. Other input, questions from folks in the audience?
It might be fantasy, but I have a washing machine that's 42 years old and it still works fine. And I had 2 CD players just die, electric screwdriver die, and now my DVD just died. And I'm told it's just dead. It's electronic trash. They can't do anything with it. And I'm sure it's planned obsolescence, so you have to buy another one. But in this grand scheme of reusing, recycling, repairing, is there anything even being discussed or whatever about manufacturers not building things to die in a couple of years?
That's absolutely a part of what the state's initiative for producer responsibility and the right to repair are about. Nate, this is probably one for you to address a little bit more specifically. And you're muted.
In terms of opportunities to deal with materials that you've just identified, absolutely. These things have fallen short for years. I mean, we've made progress in e-waste over time. There are specific national standards that address things like your CD player and stuff like that, but the incentives were never quite aligned, and you really have to induce certain things, regulatory and otherwise, to align those incentives in a way that's going to make it feasible for all of us to better participate in those. And I think this is where the state is really making some headroads. I've worked in multiple states in the West Coast, and we used to joke in the Northwest, where I live, actually, that's much more cultural up here, but California always gets there first with the regs. And that really straightens this stuff out a lot faster. You can't just rely on people always to do the right thing when a standard is in place that is difficult to identify, find, even understand where the depot might be to drop that CD player. So you're going to see a lot of change to that effect over time. And it relates directly to SB 54, as Garth has identified, and also the right to repair and recycle and reuse that's coming down from the state level. So these are all really encouraging changes that are going to promote what we're doing. And I just also like to say that when we embarked on this journey with Santa Monica, there's a bit of trepidation around how we would discuss circular economy in terms of what we were trying to do with the plan, and it's a difficult sort of shift, as we even explained it to you all tonight. And one of the, we're paid to read the tea leaves for you guys, and to a certain degree, and we had no idea who CalRecycle was going to select for their director, and that happened in the middle of our project with the city, and it felt like a really good moment where we said, all right, we can't ignore these issues anymore, and the state's feeling the same way. So I wanted to reemphasize that point. We're very encouraged by the direction that CalRecycle has taken in recent months and the pivot that we're seeing at the state level. So all of these are great signs.
That's great to hear. Well,
and could I add just a plug here, since thank you very much for that question. If you're wondering where to take that e-waste that you just cited, we have our recycling event at the City Yards. That's 2500 Michigan Avenue on Saturday, November 16th, 9 to 2. Bring it on down. That goes for everybody. So I want to make sure you can bring up to 5 boxes of papers to shred and your e-waste, and we'll take care of it. But thank you, commissioners, for your feedback. We have Judy. Go ahead.
I just wondered where we are in compliance with what goes in which barrel. I know we just got this great mailing that explains exactly what goes in where, but I'm just wondering if there's any way of knowing whether people get it and are following it. I mean, I watch people just pick up any old lid and put trash in, without looking at the colors. And I just wondered, is anybody kind of overseeing what goes in there?
Yes. Yeah. I can start the answer to that question. So I mentioned organics recycling. That was just put into place in law, 2 years ago, right? So I can say that Santa Monica, in the calendar year 2023, we increased our organics recycling by about, 12% or so, 14%, somewhere around there. So that, it's happening, right? Now, to your question, are we meeting how did you phrase it, our targets or what's being mandated? In terms of organics recycling, we are mandated to recycle all that we can. We've been focused more on outreach, like you saw that mailer, right? Where we haven't been in the position to do that before because of the lack of resources. That 3 teams, the 3 staff members that I mentioned, they're all new. Karina's actually our senior member, if you will. She's been here for a year and a half. So we're at an exciting time of actually marshaling the resources that were outlined or the recommendations in the 2019 plan and getting them underway. Those 2 other staff members that are part of Karina's team just hired back in August, end of August. So I would say yes, we're watching. We have the numbers in terms of the landfill waste, our recyclables, our organics. Now, are there certain thresholds that we should be, like say the state has set? I'm not aware of those, but I can let my colleagues answer that.
So Karina might be new to Santa Monica, but she has been in the waste industry, literally doing dumpster diving for the past decade. And coming from one of the most progressive areas, she hailed from San Francisco, relocated to Santa Monica just to help us out, right? So, and our 2 other team members also has been in this industry for years. One came from Maryland, one is local. The point is, and I don't know if Karina, if maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. So this powerful team of 3, and hopefully growing soon as resources become available, they're literally out there every single day doing dumpster diving. It's a matter of capacity. As you can imagine, there are tens of thousands of black, blue, and green trash cans out there. So they have to very strategically plan their schedule and how they do the route audit. So a lot of it is hands-on, what our consultants call boots on the ground or technical assistance. This is literally what they do. They put on a pair of boots, they drive around in an EV, and they dumpster dive. They randomly do that. And when they come across contamination, they educate, and they also have the authority to enforce. But maybe, Karina, you can elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's an exciting time right now because we just we onboarded our 2 zero waste specialists. One of them is focusing on going out to all the restaurants, especially like in the promenade on Main Street, doing a compliance check, seeing where they are in the process. Are they sorting? Are they using the organics bin? Do they even know about it? If not, we say, hey, we have 3 green bins that we can give for your kitchen if you let us come in to do a training, and we provide bilingual training in Spanish and in English. So when I first started, that's what I did right away, and that's like one of our main outreach. And then after we do the training, we go back and we check like about a month later and just let them know, hey, great job, thanks for doing the great work, or hey, you need to improve. As we all know, restaurant staff, there's a high turnover, so that's the part of like the compliance check. And then now with our second person, they're going to be doing more of the multifamily outreach and all that zero waste guide, the newsletter that we talked about earlier today. I asked, like, did you receive those 2 in the mail? That wasn't something that was occurring on a regular basis, and now we are going to be doing that, as well as like weekly social media posts and things like that. And then we are required to do route reviews by the state. That's something fairly new within Santa Monica's our division, so we're currently working on how we're going to implement that. We have to kind of pick like a neighborhood, and I think we're going to focus more on the residential side, because right now it's easy to go and talk to the restaurants and the businesses, do a training, but we can't do the door-to-door in like a 300-unit apartment complex. So maybe we're going to do more of the route reviews on like the residential. But As you can see, we're building up the program. We have started already, but that's some of the compliance checks to making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and hopefully that will just grow. It will grow. I've seen it in the Bay Area where the outreach, right now I feel like we're in the beginning of our outreach. So if we continue to do that, coupled with violation notices, or if they don't do it, right now we're just focusing on outreach and education, but for those who don't want to do, who refuse or are struggling and they just don't want to listen, unfortunately that's when money talks, and that's when we were going to have that conversation.
We do have within the Santa Monica Municipal Code the ability to cite. Our approach is carrot before the stick. So we really are trying to focus and build up and scale on our education and outreach efforts first before we just go and slap people with a bunch of fines.
Thank you.
Do we have an idea of how much of what goes in the blue bin actually gets recycled? Everyone's looking at me.
We do get a report from the MRF, from the Material Recovery Facility that we contract with. So right now the contamination rate is about 20%, meaning that for every 10 tons of materials that people put in the blue bin and my drivers send to a MRF, about 8 of those tons are actually recycled, because there's a lot of wish cycling going on, right? Oh, there's a little bit of plastic. Let me put it in the blue. No, it's landfill bound, right?
Great. Well, thank you, Yvonne and Carlos and Karina. And consultants. That was fantastic, and we look forward to welcoming you back in a couple of months.
Yes, thank you for having us.
All right. All right. Great. So we'll let you go. And we're going to be moving on to item number 6, which is our consent calendar. We have one item under that, which is approval of the September 16th, 2024 meeting minutes. Would any commissioners like to make a motion? David moves and Rob seconds. All in favor of that? Okay, we've approved it. We'll just note that Alex was out of the room at the time, but we still have 4 approved. Yes. All right, and so we will allow public input after the next agenda item, which is the last item on the agenda, the 2024 Boards and Commission Report Questionnaire. And James is going to take that one.
Okay, great, thank you. So one of the tasks or exercises of the commission and of all commissions in the city is to review the annual questionnaire. I believe this is the second year that it is a requirement of all the commissions. So most of this is just kind of administrative, identifying 2 commission members that can show up to council meetings if necessary. There's only one change from last year, and that's Alex Tower. This year is the vice chair. And so Dean and Alex are appointed in the event any updates are required of the commission. Listing out all the commission members, and we have a couple of new commission members. And then reviewing the mission, the responsibilities of the commission. That hasn't changed. I think more importantly, though, is kind of an opportunity to revisit the accomplishments and highlight some of the topics that the Commission was able to review and weigh in on in last year. And those are listed under number 5, 23-24 goals and accomplishments. So I can just go through those really quickly. Primarily, achieving carbon neutrality. Under that category, the Commission adopted a low-carbon concrete ordinance, expanded the beach dune restoration project, and expanded the electric vehicle program. for achieving water self-sufficiency, the Commission adopted a water conservation master plan, or at least reviewed it, reviewed and adopted and weighed in on the water and wastewater master plan, the recycled water master plan, and a 5-year rate study. And for the Sustainable City Plan, the Commission reviewed the Sustainable City Plan, provided input on indicators and targets, and progress towards meeting the goals of the Sustainable City Plan, as well as adopting modifications to the leaf blower ordinance. One category that the Commission was not able to achieve was under urban forest conservation ordinance and the private tree ordinance. This item has not been agendized for council, nor has staff returned to the Commission with a draft of the ordinance. So moving forward for 2024-2025, these are some of the proposed items and actions that staff is recommending bringing to the Commission, and it's an opportunity for the Commission to weigh in now, approve some of these items, or take them back, reflect on them, and then provide me with input, and we can revise this moving forward. But we're 2-3 months already into this existing fiscal year, so we only have like 8 months left. But again, so under climate action and adaptation, adopt or develop policy programs towards further electrifying existing buildings, expanding the electric vehicle charging, reviewing the 2023 greenhouse gas inventory, which is something staff is working on right now within the Office of Sustainability, and then having the water self-sufficiency and water conservation master plan initiatives brought back to the Commission for your review. And under zero waste, we just had a presentation on the zero waste plan. So adopting and reviewing the final zero waste strategic plan when it does come back to the Commission. This is a Sustainable City Plan reporting year, so we will be coming back to the Commission with updated indicators, goal areas for the Sustainable City Plan that we're proposing to present to Council next year. So we'll require the Commission to weigh in on the Sustainable City Plan and the Sustainable Rights Ordinance, as well as reviewing and adopting the final 19th Street Community Garden that is currently being worked on right now. And also, continue our efforts with the sustainable local economy. So that is what we have right now proposed for the work plan.
So, James, let me just ask you a quick question.
Sure.
Is this pretty much a paper exercise for the city clerk's office that they require every year? Would we be precluded from doing something if it's not on this list right now?
These are just recommendations. Okay. Yes.
So I would just suggest that this looks like a pretty good list to me. If anyone has any ideas or things they want to add, speak up now. Otherwise, I think you should just finalize it and move on.
Agreed.
Did we do anything on building codes, or is that, am I misremembering?
Did we do anything on building codes?
There was a thing on the e-concrete.
Yeah, I know that, yeah, but was there something on the building code updates? I don't know. Maybe that was in the distant past. I don't know.
We've got there was the low concrete ordinance, and there were some building code updates that we talked about.
Yeah.
It was updates to the energy code, I think, and energy reach codes. Yeah. We had some presentations on that.
That and building decarbonization efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
But we can certainly add that, updates
right.
on the green building code, for example. Yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Okay. And it looks like you may have a typo at the top of the second page. It says, what were the board commission's major accomplishments of 2022-23?
Oh, yes.
That's probably 23-24?
Correct.
Also, at that box, I don't know if I'm supposed to be still talking.
Yeah.
It says lead blower ordinance.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Lead blower ordinance. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Time for new prescriptions. Thank you.
Yeah. But anybody else have any other input on this list?
So what I can do is I'll update the final work plan with those typos, and then add an update on the green building codes, and then recirculate it, and we can approve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, James. And hang on a second here. So that's all we have. Is there any public input or comments? When will the recording be available?
Probably tonight, if not tomorrow,
Okay. And that'll just be posted?
on the city YouTube channel, and then James will have a copy too.
Okay, great. All right. Feel so official. All right, well.
I know.
Okay, well, we are adjourned at 8:47. Thank you, everyone.